All right, here we are at MSP Confidential, Friday, October 20th, 2023. Holy moly, the year is almost over. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. It's awesome that you hopefully can join us and get to enjoy our wonderful guest today, Ann Westerheim. Ann, how are you? I'm going to go ahead and, uh,
Right.
and and pan this out a little bit so I can.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. My head was filling the whole screen
There we
there.
go. So,
All
and
right.
we met. I just funny enough, I just sent you a note on LinkedIn, which is where we first messaged you. We had met back in 2017, and so
Oh, wow.
a couple of years have passed, almost 7 years now since we first met, and it was I think at a DattoCon way back in 2017. So, thanks for coming
Oh,
on
wow.
on the live stream. And how are you?
I'm doing really well, and thank you so much for inviting me to this.
Of
I,
course.
I think it's really cool you're doing this.
Well, I think there's just so many folks with so many great things going on in their professional careers, in their lives, that I thought it was kind of cool to tell some of those stories, but also, where that kind of intersects with everything that MSPs are trying to do in their professional careers and with their clients and everything else. And so there's this interesting layer of how can we improve client experiences? How can we make the whole, business of being an MSP a little bit more enjoyable and better. And I think the idea of tapping into some of the confidential learnings that some of the pros out there have had over the years, I think is kind of neat. And so you've had an interesting background. Speaking of confidential things, I noticed you spent some time in Oslo. My wife actually gave me a phrase to ask you, which is "snakke du norsk," meaning "Do you
Uh,
speak Norwegian?"
yeah, Lita.
Lite,
Jeg
lite,
snakker
right?
lite norsk. I have a 1100 plus day streak on Duolingo with my Norwegian lessons. And because I never speak it, I can understand it pretty well. I can read it pretty well. And I spent a summer at University of Oslo trying to learn how to write it because my parents, um, they're Norwegian and they lived in Sweden for 15 years. So they always spoke some strange mixture
Right.
of Swedish, Norwegian, and English. So, and that's what I learned to speak way back when.
Well, I think we have sort of a reverse scenario. My wife is actually Swedish, and she spent many years in Oslo, living and working in Oslo. And so when we met at the time, she was actually working and living in Oslo. Eventually, she made the move here and all that stuff. But so I've picked up a little bit of Swedish over the years,
Yeah.
and it is very similar to Norwegian, as you may already know. But yeah, people that have been in both places kind of end up in a bit of a mix of both things, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And so, but you also got your start at MIT. I believe you were in
Mhm.
engineering, and so I was super fascinated to find that you have a couple of patents, and so I kind of was thinking, I wonder what it's like to go from writing, semiconductor related patents to writing a book about cybersecurity for Main Street, and so I wonder if that ever crossed your mind.
Um, yeah, it's pretty different. So I worked in engineering for a number of years. I did my research was actually in high temperature superconductors. Joined the semiconductor industry, which is where I started working, and then our division was acquired by Intel many years ago. And sort of the idea there was if you arrive at the office at 8:01, you had to sign into a book that you'd be reprimanded, and you basically were expected not to leave if there were anything going on in your area of responsibility. So I had a friend, his wife used to come to the lobby with his children so he could say goodnight. They'd be in there, 8 o'clock at night, whatever, in their pajamas saying goodnight to dad while he had to go back to work. So I realized that's not what I wanted to do for the next many years, and I decided to become a consultant. And that's why people always ask me, what does Ikaru mean? It doesn't. I made it up because engineering, education. I was going to be a consultant and have my freedom.
Yeah.
So a big change. So I really loved my time working in the semiconductor industry, but really. I'm very interested in technology in general, so I kind of get torn. I just finished reading the book Chip War not too long ago, And there's a lot of people I know who are mentioned in the book, so it kind of like made me nostalgic for that, but it's been a long time ago now.
Yeah. Well, and technology, I mean, starting any business, I feel like there's, this idea of, you said it just now, having a little bit of freedom, being your own boss. But I think that also takes a little bit of time because in the beginning, one does sort of spend a lot of time slaving to your own business in a way. And so, I'm curious nowadays, I've seen you at many of the events. It sounds like you have the time to get out to the conferences and that you've built a business that gives you a bit of that flexibility. So tell me a little bit about your journey there.
Yeah, so years ago, I knew I wanted to start a family, so I have three amazing kids, and they're off in college. Actually, one graduated already. So I figured, that's when I was really going to try to put the accelerator on the business. And we've grown steadily through the years, which has been really great. We got a really, amazing team of people. We're 17 people, amazing group. We work with some really fantastic customers, but we've grown very conservatively over the years. And because when my kids were younger, I didn't want to travel a lot. So I was just kind of focused on building the business. And it was hard early on because I felt like a kid on a swing set, when you kick your legs, but you don't move at all. But when you finally get some momentum, it gets easier. And so the last couple of years, so then COVID hit, of course, right when it was going to be my time to accelerate. But so I've really enjoyed getting out and getting to meet a lot of people, getting to know a lot of people in the industry because I was very pleasantly surprised. I figured I would be a consultant for these years, kind of, um, and grew a decent business, but I really wanted to make sure we had a great family life as well. And very pleasantly surprised that it's a great time to be in the industry. There's a lot going on right now, and always amazed at how many wonderful people I've met. So, and looking forward to some more travel coming up. So,
Yeah,
good
I mean,
times.
well, it's the busy time of year. All the conferences, of course, are
Yeah,
in full swing. IT Nation coming up at the beginning of November. That seems to be the one that
yeah,
draws the majority of the folks out. And so I find every single conference in the vendor side of things, I get there. It's like a reunion every single time with everybody that
yeah.
you know. But kind of towards the end of the thing, everybody just disperses. You kind of never say goodbye to anybody at the end of a
Mm,
conference. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but then it's
yeah.
great to say hi again, at the next one. So I find I go in that little bit of that merry-go-round of just sort of uh, reunions every time there's a conference. And I love it. I love seeing the folks there. It does feel like an extended family to me. And having spent, 16, 17 years as an MSP myself, I think it was one of the things that I just started seeing the same folks coming out to the same things. And I've always talked, maybe you can tell me about your experience at the conferences, but I've always thought of the hallway track is the name I give it, is sort of those conversations that happen in the hallways with your peers,
Oh,
with people that you've just met, sometimes have the most insight at these events. And I'm curious if there's one such conversation that you remember giving you an interesting pivot point in your career as a consultant.
yeah. I think like just standing in line for coffee, wind up learning a lot. And I was just gonna chime in now that I've gotten to know a lot of people. It's also a lot more fun because I see some of the same people. Lots if folks are listening and haven't been to a lot of conferences, definitely get out there and get to know people. But I can remember once I was standing in line for coffee or the buffet. There's a person behind me, and this goes back a number of years, and just talking about like kind of taking the plunge to do fixed price contracts and how do you work that out. And I was just chatting with somebody. I remember what he said. He just said, "Well, just you could just reach out to your client, say we're simplifying our billing, and we're just going to offer this simple flat rate." And just the way he presented it, it's like I changed my whole strategy just based on. I don't remember even who it was, but had a lot of. Yeah, I like the hallway conversations are really powerful.
Well, that's interesting. That particular nugget seems like a really powerful one because I feel like a lot of MSPs that start as a single owner operator type of business invariably are doing some kind of break fix work and then have themselves, find themselves in a situation where they kind of reach that glass ceiling. They can't work any more hours. They want to try and start moving some of those clients into a recurring billing model. And that
Mm,
conversation tends to be fairly difficult. Most of the clients that have only ever paid for break fix often find it difficult to move for no reason, justifiable reason at all, into this flat fee. But I guess if you just simplify it that much, what
Yeah,
was your experience actually using that technique in those conversations with clients?
yeah, it worked really well. So just by kind of reframing it as simplifying versus some giant mathematical computation, and maybe some deals were well priced and maybe some weren't, but on average they were, and it did make life a lot easier. But I just remember, like, it just seemed like such a hard shift to do until kind of just got this reframing conversation to, hey, we're going to simplify the billing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that worked well. And we've moved people over. We've been around for a long time, so sometimes I think, like, people who are just starting MSPs now, you can kind of start with all the good habits right from the beginning. And we're not we're pretty flexible in how we work with people, so we don't not everybody does every recommendation that we say, and we try to meet people where they are. But it's great to be able to talk to other people who are, they're different parts of the country, and they just freely give advice. Um, I just find that's, a really great thing about the industry.
Yeah, I do find that also with the community, and it's kind of what happened to me. When I joined
Mhm.
the Apple Consultants Network back in 2007, I want to say, um, I had somebody call me that was another member here in Vancouver, Mark Cohen, just randomly be like, "Hey, I saw you pop up on the consultants locator. Who are you and what's up?" Literally out of the blue. I was like, "Oh wow, okay."
Yeah,
And so I was, pretty newish at the time to the whole scene. And he had sort of an interesting operation. He was also a service provider, an authorized service provider. So he had a shop where he could do repairs and stuff like that. And kind of just took me under his wing, and he was willing to, bring me out on server setups and
yeah,
kind of show me the ropes of all that stuff, which I thought was invaluable. And so I have always felt sort of that pay forward need, or just part of what was inculcated to me in
yeah.
that process. And I find that the community at large is very much about sharing information. And certainly with the cybersecurity landscape, it seems like
Oh
the
yeah,
information sharing where security is concerned is even becoming sort of a baseline requirement for a lot of MSPs, vendors, and they're always communicating on whether it's Slack or Discords about the things they're seeing. So, yeah, it's just all
yeah,
very, very moment notice type of thing. But it's great to see, and I think that collaboration can only make everybody better. So kudos for
yeah.
having experienced that on the receiving end, and hopefully you're in a position now to pay that forward too. Which kind of
Yeah.
brings me to your book, because you wrote a book called Cybersecurity for Main Street, Cyberfit in 21 Days. And I thought this was interesting because I've been around some of the marketing things that are built for MSPs, and a lot of them will say at one point or another, you should become a celebrity in your own market, or you should write a book, or you should become a published author. And so I'm curious to know sort of what was the initial impetus for writing a book, first of all, and if there was, an ultimate or ulterior motive marketing wise, or if it really was just a technique to try and get your clients to better process some of this information, which is over most people's heads.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard a lot of people will give that marketing advice. People, they're going to lose a business card, although I don't know if many people use business cards anymore. They're not going to throw away a book. So certainly that advice is out there. But I've wanted to write a book for a really long time, and I've kind of, even like many years ago, I thought I'd write a book about crystal power, but not like the new age kind of thing, like actual power, like um, semiconductors are all based on crystal. So kind of had this idea I wanted to do something. I love technology, and sort of one of the things that motivates me is I want people to like technology. Oh, thank you for putting that up there. I want other people to love technology too. So I'm really enthusiastic about it. I'm a technology optimist. There's so much going on right now with cybersecurity, but we also, you have to think of all the benefits that we get. And then,
Yeah,
but then it became this thing on my list forever. Like, oh, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to do this one day. And then finally, I think I was at the CompTIA Communities and Councils meeting a year ago, and I sort of jotted down on a piece of paper, like okay, I gotta do, like, now I have to do this because there's so many great conversations about cybersecurity. And I kind of jotted down, and I think I cleaned up the piece of paper where I wrote, but I said it's going to be 21 days, sort of like a fitness program. So that's the cyber fit piece of it. And I just wrote down 21 things that I thought were relevant and wrote them. And then I licensed one of my favorite tech cartoons is Randy Glassberg, and so I licensed some of his cartoons for the book that I really love. So, like, can you download files from the cloud on a clear day? So, like, they're just they're kind of nerdy. So, but hopefully people will see, like, hey, it's a cartoon, makes the book a
I
little friendlier to read.
I love the book, by the way. I read it, and I love the approach of sort of, hey, here's one thing you can do per day kind of thing. And I noticed that you were kind of following a bit of that same MO as Cybersecurity Awareness Month is in progress here with October, sort of a post
Yeah,
a day kind of thing with each of the recommendations from the book. Which has 21 different recommendations, and you go from everything, starting with like just updates and passwords to managing your passwords. Passwords managers are still like the one that blows my mind. That I can't remember the last time I had to remember a password, but so many people still are reusing passwords. So many
oh yeah,
employees are mixing their personal and corporate passwords with the same thing, and these are where
yeah,
some of these issues really cause problems for organizations. But multi-factor authentication, of course, managing
yeah.
your inventory, phishing, domain, like you could cover so many different areas. Was there one that you were particularly passionate about that you find resonates the most when you talk to clients or prospects about the book?
I think the disconnect. I think a lot of people know. Okay, I know I'm supposed to be patching, and I know I'm supposed to have strong passwords, but then in real life they do the opposite. So when there's a major breach, sometimes they disclose the most popular passwords. So if you ask somebody, yeah, we're supposed to use strong passwords, I know that. And then you look at what happens in reality, and like 50% of the people out there use the password or 1 2 3 4 5 6. So that's a big one. And I had a really fun experience. I talked at the local senior center, had a men's breakfast this past Monday morning. So it was a lot of fun. There were like 50 people there, and I just walked through some of the tips from the book, and people all had like really great stories. And just seeing them tell each other, "Hey, I saw this," and I said, "This is exactly what people need to do. Just talk about security." And even some of the really big events like Colonial Pipeline, I think was kind of traced back to there was a VPN account for an employee who was no longer part of the company. It didn't have MFA on it, so it sounds like, it's this big plot or whatever, but a lot of cybersecurity boils down to some really basic stuff. So I'm
Hmm.
hoping people will find it approachable and also gain confidence. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get, now I understand these annoying updates. Now I understand why I need to do this. And now I get it. It's not just Microsoft that's not secure. With all
Yeah.
their patch, it's all software needs to be updated.
Well, and MSPs play
Yeah,
such a big role in moving that sort of where that threshold of convenience versus security is,
yeah,
because I think even as recently as 5 years ago, we would have perhaps caved a little more easily to clients' whims or their convenience,
yeah,
and so that's I find a difficult habit to break if perhaps you're a technical minded owner operator and don't have a little bit of that strong willfulness that you can impose on clients during those conversations and those things. And so it's kind of a learned habit. You acquire that over time of just having these conversations over and over and over again. Or then at some point, you also, maybe as a business, you grow tired of the risk that you've now started to think about that you have in your own business as an MSP. But um, what are some of your learnings there that are ways for MSPs to maybe try and get to that threshold a little bit faster? I find that's still a big challenge.
yeah. It is still a big challenge. And I think trying to get things on a roadmap help a lot to say, okay, look, I'm not, you don't have to do everything right this instant, but I want to tell you this is what good looks like for a company your size, and here's what a roadmap would look like in how to get there. And I just went to Starbucks. I got my nice premium coffee today, and the cost of this latte would cover an important security license for a month. And I think making that translation, but I think the other thing about the education is I think maybe you could say what good looks like and provide a roadmap to get there so
Mm,
people don't just shut down like I can't do all this right now. Try to position it in ways, talking about risk and what could happen, what could happen to a business. And that's it's like there's just reality. Like there's a lot of cybercrime because cyber criminals can make a lot of money committing cybercrime. So there's going to be crime. People will steal cars, they're going to break into houses, they're going to commit cybercrime when they can. But then the other piece that I've been thinking a bit about also is um, like trying to explain and position. So, like, if you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, you got to exercise more or eat right, you're not expecting to get a doctorate level education in biochemistry and how all that works. You're getting, the doctor's going to give you guidelines. And I think sometimes if you get into too much trying to explain how everything works, it's going to take forever to get there. So maybe position more as guidelines. And I'm trying to be more mindful of that myself.
mm,
And I also kind of like with a doctor analogy. Not all our clients follow all best practices. We try to get people there. We try to show them, the right way to do things, but we try to move them along, and not do any really heavy-handed. Okay, well you're out. Like a doctor firing. You didn't run 20 miles this week. You're not my patient anymore. Whatever. So I we're flexible, but there is a reality around that about it does become risk for us, and at some point you have to just say, we just can't work with you if you're not going to take security seriously.
yeah. Well, and I feel like even in the now in the Chat GPT era, you have those patients going to put in their symptoms or whatever into Chat GPT and questioning everything the doctor says. The Google doctors,
Oh
so to
yeah,
speak. But I find this is potentially also the case with technology. And I have had situations where clients, had found some superficial article about some of the technology or things or
mm,
recommendations we had maybe been talking about, and then came back to suggest a completely different way or approach of doing something that was just based on a non-considered approach based on their business or their requirements. And so sometimes people are just out there, listening, or the things that influence them are not necessarily within our reach or grasp. And I find that's interesting.
yeah,
Just yesterday, we were here at a CompTIA security workshop that Wayne Selk was putting on, which is fantastic. I was thinking about it because I came away with
yeah,
like 6 pages of notes of really
oh
interesting conversations around evaluating risk and
yeah,
understanding, what are the different areas of risk that you could be talking about. And this is, I think, the critical like transition that MSPs will make in the coming years, is to have these much deeper business level conversations. But it starts with doing it yourself. I feel like,
oh
because
yeah,
unless you understand this process intimately, front to back, in doing it for your own business, you're going to have a really hard time justifying why your client should listen to you in helping do it for them. At the same time, they kind of also
yeah,
defer all these things to the MSPs in the same breath, and so it's really interesting,
yeah,
challenge, I guess. And I'm sure you've come across this. A client sends you insurance form to fill out, and they kind of don't even participate of their own rescue in that situation. What has been your experience with some of these things? And hopefully, obviously, you're having with
yeah.
your book a lot more success educating clients in this. But
Yeah, I mean, well, sometimes folks will come to us, and we're pretty clear. We cannot fill out the form for them, but we can explain what the terms mean, and that's something that folks should not. It's the business is getting insurance for themselves. They have to sign off, but we can help explain it. And yeah, everything that Wayne is doing with CompTIA is fabulous. And we just got off. We are now up for doing the the CompTIA cybersecurity trust mark. So we're going to get ourselves audited to make sure we're doing what we need to do. Um, yeah, but talking about risk and trying to do it in a way that's not just like trying to scare people, because I think people, the fight, flight, or freeze, people just get overwhelmed and they won't do things. And I've had, funny experiences. One of our long-term clients, this goes back a little while. I've had one medical office tell me a while back, well, we don't need to worry about cybersecurity because we have insurance. It's like, well, you can't, they don't really give. And now the insurance companies have all, they come up with these
Yeah.
questionnaires because they're tired of trying to fight back claims from folks who have done nothing to protect themselves. And then another client came to me once and said, "Oh, I just went to the seminar with Fidelity, and they were talking about cybersecurity. Like, have you heard of that?" Like, it's just people will just come to you with the funniest things. So,
Yeah, well, and I was going to give the example that I could have been speaking to a client on a monthly basis about some initiative related to cybersecurity improvement, and it wasn't until that client received an email from their colleague in the same industry that got phished or had some kind of incident or
yeah,
whatever that they actually started paying attention. And so I feel like there's this interesting layer, like it doesn't feel real until it happens to somebody that you know. And so I'm
yeah,
it's a difficult thing to manage, I think, because MSPs I think say it a lot, and I think clients just become a little bit numb to sort of the recurring theme of it. And so it's interesting. But the compliance is insurance. Interestingly, you mentioned insurance.
hmm,
And just last week, we were chatting with Matt Lee, and he made the comment that in the last few years, insurance has actually moved the cybersecurity needle more than anything else because, people now can't get their insurance unless they're, complying with certain baselines. And whether
oh
you're
yeah,
doing a more complete, framework of some kind, CIS, CMMC, NIST, what have you,
hmm,
I think it's getting businesses thinking about this a little bit more, thoroughly. And certainly in Canada, at the very least, the government of Canada
yeah,
now published a cybersecurity baseline. It's not enforced anywhere, but I kind of see a little bit of the writing on the wall where insurance providers may now have something to reference when they're trying to give these guidelines to clients. Be like, hey, before we can insure you, you need to comply with this framework, which is now
yeah.
sort of the guideline from the government. And so I feel like that's coming. This is the cybersecurity compliance wave that I think will catch a lot of people by surprise. And it happened with FTC safeguards. Did you have any clients sort of fall under FTC safeguards and people pushing this until the very last minute to try and do the
Well,
work?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's human nature. You think it's not real, then suddenly it's going to impact you, and then it becomes real. I just yeah, the questions now that come from insurance companies, it might be 5 pages of questions, really detailed stuff. And then some of the like if you kind of dig a little deeper, some of the questions don't even really make sense. So you kind of for just like, do you use MFA? Like, well, everywhere where we can, or um, they're sort of open ended, or sometimes they'll have a list of solutions. I mean, one of the things about the CompTIA trust mark that I like is that it's an opportunity for MSPs to basically self regulate. It will be audited by another party, but you can contribute to writing the rules so they make sense because in the U.S. here, not all lawmakers really know a lot about technology. So you may come up with regulation. One of my concerns is that big tech has the lobbies, so they're going to fight off responsibility, and the government will make their. I think small business is going to get basically screwed by this, and I think that if MSPs get ahead of it and do things like the trust mark, yeah, that's it right there. There's a wait list for it now, but I think that it's going to basically covers all the things that are required and gives us the opportunity to show, hey, we take security seriously. We want to show you that we take it seriously before there's some government guidelines that would, the way it always turns out is they favor bigger businesses. And there's a lot of controversy right now about the CMMC that,
Yeah.
the cost, and there's been a lot of changes, but for, say a 10, 20 person machine shop who does some work, obviously security is extremely important. But some of the requirements that they have by not necessarily prioritizing the most important things and having this long list of things that wind up being expensive really put too much burden on small businesses. And then there's the whole like the flow through and people getting schematics that show things they don't need to see to make the little part because the big company, that's the prime contractor, didn't make the effort to pare that down. So that's another thing. Working with small businesses, I'm an advocate for small businesses, and I think MSPs really need to take security seriously first before rules are imposed on us that may or may not totally make
Mm.
sense.
Well, and I feel, and this is something Wayne commented on yesterday too. I feel like CompTIA is lobbying strongly to at least apply blame where blame should be placed, because one of the things that seems to be happening is the MSPs are getting roped into situations where
Yeah,
even the supply chain has a situation or some kind of incident, and then the MSP, because they put that software in the customer, they're being held liable for situations like that. And
yeah,
it's really tricky because the supply chain vendor could have all the certifications and all the compliance that you want and still go through an incident, and how are you to prepare for any of that? And so I feel like there's still this layer of unfiltered risk that's being applied to MSPs. And,
yeah,
and so kudos to CompTIA for some of the work they're doing there. I think it's going to make a big difference in the long term, no doubt.
yeah.
Well, what are some of the things that you feel that clients are the most responsive to? Because you're right. I think the idea of putting initiatives in a roadmap and maybe tackling it from a time, versus not a big mountain to move. And MSPs, I feel like
Yeah,
we're our own worst enemies where that's concerned. We get this idea, we want to try and do the security initiative, and suddenly we want to
yeah,
do all of it for all clients at the same time right now.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
almost impossible, of course. And then you give up, and then you
yeah.
sort of lose priority to the emergencies and the fires and the other things. But where have you had success, sort of doing a little bit more of the graduated approach?
I think we do regular review meetings with clients, so we go over. That's a chance to go over security. This is where you're at. This is what we recommend. We do a lot of educational events, that people can learn, come speak. We did one on password managers this summer. We do a lot of different things around that. Give people a chance to um, ask questions. We just did we had a couple of stragglers that we finally said we're 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 upgrading you. There's going to be a nominal cost. We're going to give it free for a month, so we're just going to pay for it. But after the month, you're going to pay for it. And what I did there was I recorded a video to explain it, and I found that actually works. That works seems to work really well.
The video, just
So
the
right,
medium. Yeah.
yeah. So I for this round I recorded a video just explaining why we're doing what we're doing. It was probably, I don't even know if it was even 3 minutes long, and I find that people I think respond to that better than just a written email. And we're going to give people, they have a lot of time to ask questions. They have weeks and weeks to ask questions, but then we're going to make it clear that you are up. I want them to consciously make the decision. And it may be that in their business, for whatever is going on with the budget, and maybe they can't do it right now, but they will do it later. But I find, yeah, so that's been a really good tool. And when I don't do it all the time, but when we send out proposals, we'll do videos with that too, and it helps kind of explain it. Uh, and just like not giving up on it,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to show value with reporting and not going too crazy with the details. Some of our clients love, like we have one law firm we work with, and there's our point of contact there is just amazing. He has so many questions. He wants to check out everything, and it's kind of fun because that's what we want to talk about. And then for other folks, it's like they'll just stop us, like I don't want to know. Just do what we're supposed to do, and
Well, and I think
I don't have
that's
to read
maybe
them.
the interesting thing to do. I went through a period where I kind of figured out that giving too many options was actually counterproductive to getting to any of
Yeah,
the objectives, because in these situations where the client just doesn't have the right percentage of information or knowledge or baseline to even make a decision, these decisions just are going to dangle in the wind for months and months on end. And this is kind of what happened. And so I got to a point
Yeah.
where I would simply, even if I did it through an email, and the video I think is now so much more ubiquitous in the last few years. I think COVID was
Yeah.
sort of the transition to move
Yeah.
everybody into the video era. But even when I was just sending a flat out email about it, I
Yeah.
kind of switched the mentality to a little bit more of an aggressive stance. Be like, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, we're going to go ahead and make this change at the end of the month for you. It's going to come with this increase in cost. Let me know if you have any issue with that. And that slight
Yeah.
difference from asking for permission
Yeah.
versus just kind of letting the client know that they need to go in this direction, there is a cost to it, period.
Yeah.
Um, the it was surprising actually, positively, how few people would have any issue with that approach at all. They're like, oh, thank you for bringing this up and doing this for us. It was kind of the majority of the responses. And so it's kind of like this, mind blown moment of like,
Yeah.
why didn't I start doing this 10 years ago? And so I think a lot of MSPs dwell in sort of wanting to get the client's permission and getting them the choice because they feel like giving them choice is the right thing to do. But in many cases, it's not. It's actually
Yeah.
counterproductive, just delays the process unnecessarily.
Yeah. I think there's a whole psychology around the paradox of choice. I think it does make people freeze. And that's, with this round right now with the stragglers, I think that only 2 out of 26 came back and didn't want to go forward. I said, we're going to talk again in the new year. Um, but I think making it simple. And then the other interesting little thing that reminded me of, we're making some changes to our 401k. So we're working with the benefits company, and I think this woman like explained everything to me. She explained it again. I have my finance person involved, and I'm thinking that must be because she must be thinking like, what is like, how do they not? There are a couple of different choices of things that we could do with matching and this, that, and the other thing. And that's probably how our clients feel like. So this person who's working the benefits company, she just talks about 401ks all day long. And so
Yeah.
everything totally makes sense to her. And I was looking, if you do a match for this, the up to this percent, then it's a half a point above that. So and I just kind of laughed after a while that, yeah, she must really be wondering why I'm still asking, like I don't get this. But I think we got it all squared away.
Yeah, the silver lining of being put in the position your clients are in, right? I think can help you sort of make some of those monumental
Yeah.
shifts in how you communicate and how you drive some of these
Yeah.
projects forward, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So let me get back to the book for a sec because I'm just curious about writing a book. I've never thought to myself I'm going to go write a book. So it's never been on my task list to go figure out a topic or even write a book. And so I was curious about the process. More so, sort of what are some of the silver linings after writing the book that you have found where it's like, this was an unexpected thing that was really enjoyable about the process or the outcome. Have you become a celebrity in your local Boston market? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of fun because when I finally, I mean, I did have it on my list for a long time, and then I had the outline for a long time, and then finally, eh, I got annoyed with myself and blocked out the time on the calendar, and I'm working on my day one tip now, and I've just forced myself. I have these, I have these funny clocks on my desk that I don't know if you can see this. You
Yeah.
turn it to, yeah, the Pareto clock or whatever, but so I have a little time. So anyway, I forced myself to go through, blocks of writing, and then I just said I'm going to just write it, no matter how terrible it is. I'm going to write section one today, and then kept improving it, and just made myself a timeline. So there's things in there about the formatting. There's I publish this right on Amazon, so they have a desktop publishing thing, an application that I found easy to use, and then yeah, it's kind of neat how many people like I think of my kids writing papers in school and doing problem sets. Like they have to produce this much stuff
Mm.
all the time, and I finally got my ideas on paper, and it's just been kind of fun. Like how many people have told me, "Oh, I've always thought of writing a book," and it's kind of opened up a lot of conversations. And then it is a thing that that you can reference and talk about.
Have you
which
added
makes it
published
kind of fun.
author to your LinkedIn profile yet?
I I think I
I,
wrote
don't- I don't
author
think.
of this book. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have to
Um,
do that. Yeah.
and so I don't want you to admit to more than you need to admit to, but did you? I think you mentioned somewhere that ChatGPT helped you write, or helped you sort of get past some of the writer's block or some of the blank pages. And I was curious to ask you if you got any of that help because you only published earlier this year, and so I think we were sort of right in the thick of the launch of ChatGPT.
Yeah, there are a couple of places where I got stuck, and then I found that that sort of spurs you to have some creativity because this was around like when I was actively writing. It was early in the year, like January, so it hadn't already come up yet. And uh, just an interesting thing about that with writing, I think that like people, you could maybe write email snippets with Chat GPT. You got to be careful because it's pulling stuff from other places,
Hmm.
and some of the stuff can just be wrong. And I heard an interesting lecture. It was family weekend at my daughter's college, and I heard a lecture from a professor in the business school who was talking about studies that were done with Chat GPT in terms of productivity. So now, we're in October, it's been out, people are already doing studies on it. And so what they found was like the productivity improvement of folks who are not good writers um, lifts you, like, you get a very big uptick in productivity. So if you're just sort of stuck, you don't know how to put words together, and if you're a better writer, the improvement is in productivity is pretty minimal, but still some improvement. And the writers who aren't as good get a boost so big that they're almost up to the level of the good writers. Now that's an interesting thing because if you look at a workforce, a diverse workforce with a lot of different skill levels, that's a
Hmm.
very powerful tool to increase productivity. Um, but I think just starting to get ideas, and we're doing a webinar next week. So I went on the Chat GPT and said, "Can you suggest a, a webinar title for this?" And I use it. So one of the things that they talked about in the studies is using it as sort of a like creativity um,
Unblocker. Yeah.
it, unblocker. Yeah, just like when you're just stuck, like I don't know what to say, but um, I've seen some things where like you read it, it's like, okay, that was written by Chat GPT, so that doesn't work either.
Yeah.
But
I've been using it plenty, and I find that it's great in even just creating or suggesting frameworks. And I tend to think in frameworks, and I've always thought of myself as a decent writer. I can write a good looking email that makes
yeah,
sense. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, that kind of thing. But sometimes you just don't know where to start or even don't have the framework of what you want to do. And sometimes even, in the annual planning process of some of our strategy here at ScalePad, sometimes you just have all these ideas of things you want to talk about, don't know how to frame them in any kind of interesting context for a discussion or for a presentation of a certain length or what have you.
hmm
And I find that ChatGPT is great at condensing that type of input into something
yeah,
reasonably intelligible to listen to or to read. And so I have found a ton of help, even as, for marketing copy. Just you can, it's not going to always get your style or your voice or your tone or things like that, but it'll give you a lot of really interesting things, and then it's much easier to tweak into the actual sound and things that you want. So it's definitely
yeah,
changing a lot. Now, people obviously have been scared of their jobs being taken by ChatGPT, but I find it's quite the opposite. I think people's jobs will become that much more impactful with the
yeah.
help and aid of ChatGPT in those scenarios. I'm sure some have your clients been asking you about AI and sort of the influence. How can we use AI in our business? Have you had any of those conversations?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely come up, and I think that from the small business side, realizing for example, law firms, you better be careful what you put into a public model if
Of
you're actually
course.
putting in a real case with sensitive information. And putting so we've talked to folks about putting in you know kind of acceptable use policy for that. You can have a private chat gpt. I haven't played around with this, but you can actually put in your own profile. So somebody was telling me about that. So you could say, tell chat gpt who you are to help it write like you as well. So I think it's a really cool tool. And people, I saw an article pop up, like people thought communication was going to die when PowerPoint, came out, that was just going to ruin meetings. And um, every time something new comes out, like civilization's going to end and we're not going to be able to think. But I think that, yeah, AI is not going to uh, take the jobs away. It's somebody who maybe can do your job better with AI. That
Yeah.
that's more of a risk. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's
Very
kind of
interesting.
fun too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's certainly there's so much hype, and I think the guidelines, the ethics around it are still sort of all
Yeah,
in moving goalpost frameworks right now,
yeah,
and so it'll be interesting. I was chatting with Todd Kane a few weeks ago, and he sort of had the insight, as it does with many new technologies, that the first 3 to 5 years are going to be a bit of the Wild West, and then
yeah.
the governments will probably step in on the ethics piece, on the the things that are causing mass job changes or shifts in the
Hmm.
workforce, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to evolve. And it'd be interesting to see how this cybersecurity conversation overall continues to evolve as well. And
Yeah.
so kudos once again, I think, for writing a book. What a feat in and of itself, but also to be able to use it in your daily practice as a consultant. I see you talking a lot about the book, so obviously it's a great way to get ideas across to your network, to your prospects, to your customers. And I hope you continue having success with the book. Now, not to leave you hanging without getting into some of the nuances of Ann Westerheim, I have a little bit of a speed round of questions that
Okay.
I wanted to ask you. Um, Now, some of these are kind of technology focused, some of them are not so much, but I thought I'd try it and see what happens.
Okay.
Now, what was the first family friendly website you remember ever visiting?
Family friendly. Uh, well, I go by Alta Vista for searching
Yeah,
search
so
before
yeah.
Google. Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was Prince's website, or the artist formerly known as
Oh,
Prince at some point. But
yeah.
that was the first website I tried to load on a dial-up connection. I think I pressed return and went and had dinner and came back and the website had loaded. So, and how
Oh,
quickly we forget about those situations.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Here's a maybe a esoteric question. Do you daydream? Do you find yourself daydreaming about things?
Do I daydream? Yeah. I, I, don't- I get well, I get a lot of different ideas. Sometimes I'll just tell the people in the office I'll just walk around. I said, don't mind me, I'm just thinking.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's the topic that sort of takes the priority of your daydreaming thoughts, if you don't mind sharing? Is it business stuff? How to go do some initiative, something with clients?
Yeah, business stuff or we're just talking about AI a little bit and I've been thinking a lot. I'm almost done reading the book by Eric Schmidt, who's a former CEO of Google, and Henry Kissinger. It's actually somebody in his group, and one other computer scientist wrote it. I'm really fascinated by the application of technology and how, and the book goes into this a lot, like the age of faith, the age of reason, and now we're in the age of AI, and how we're going to approach things that uh, we don't comprehend
Hmm.
will be kind of neat. So, whatever I'm reading, I'll be thinking about.
Well, I mean, those are things that I think cross your mind in little sporadic moments, and this is why the daydreaming question is
Yeah,
interesting, because
yeah,
sometimes people have that on their mind in that moment, and other times they're completely, whatever. I don't daydream, or it's not top of mind.
yeah, yeah.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Um, Do you have a in the MSP industry? Is there somebody that you consider a role model, or somebody you admire that has sort of given you a lot of ideas or mentorship?
Um, I really like talking to Matt Lee. I think he's just got a lot of positive energy. Like listening to his ideas, and I like what Joy Beeland is doing with uh, regulations and all that. So there's a lot of people on my list of
Yeah.
folks I like to talk to.
Yeah, this was a tricky one because people feel awful of forgetting somebody in their lists when they mention any one of those folks. So I won't ask you to go any further,
Yeah,
otherwise you'll get in trouble. You'll feel like you're getting in trouble. Do you have a go-to podcast? Something that's sort of the number one thing you like listening to?
I actually don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I will occasionally in the car listen to true crime podcasts,
Hmm.
um, but not that often.
Interesting. My wife listens to crime podcasts. She loves sort of the how deep the stories get and the complexity of the cases and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's very popular in Scandinavia as well.
Hmm. Yeah, well, Scandinavia and in particular Denmark seems to have a really interesting dark fascination with sort of crime and dark type of series and stuff like that. We watch those here a lot because uh,
Mhm.
my wife loves that type of show, generally speaking, and
Yeah.
I've become a fan of that type of show. Lately, I've been watching a bunch of Spanish thrillers or dramas in on Netflix, and those are particularly
Oh,
fascinating. I speak Spanish, and so it's easy for
yeah.
me to watch them and still
Yeah.
be able to maybe multitask or do something else. But so yeah, super interesting. Um, what do you think is the most overrated trend right now in the MSP industry?
Well, I'm going to say probably AI because we're on that sort of like there's a giant amount of hype. I do think the changes will be profound, but I think right now what we're seeing is just a lot of hype.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. Everybody talking about it for the sake of talking about it, not necessarily, making any deep, meaningful innovation changes happen with it. So I agree. Some folks
yeah.
are really sort of at the bleeding edge of it, of course, and I've seen it in some
Mhm.
of the vendors launching AI driven capabilities. We have
Yeah.
little secret projects and things we're working on,
Yeah.
and that stuff is really fun. I'd like to see how this really intersects with utility, in the
Yeah.
very near future, and so it remains to be seen, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. I think the
Awesome.
automation will have a big impact. I kind of worry a little bit, runaway train kind of thing with automation, but there's a lot of things that now can be done and more intelligently.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole RPA thing, stuff like what Roost is doing, or
Yeah.
what Pia is doing, with some of the vendors that are helping automate very complex, types of processes, I think is a great start. Now, imagine obviously being able to dynamically change some of those processes based on the understanding of a model consuming some of
Yeah.
the data. Crushbank has a bit of AI going on, with how they interpret data in tickets to
Mhm.
provide recommendations or find answers and stuff like that. So I feel like
Yeah.
there's just so many different possible applications just in our industry that it'll be interesting to see what starts coming out. And caution to the MSPs: beware of the shiny object. Let these things
Yeah.
evolve a little bit. Don't jump right in, because sometimes we make a bigger mess of our processes than we need to right away. Um, and this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for making a little bit of time on a Friday afternoon
Yeah.
to come and join MSP Confidential, share a bit of your thoughts. Congrats again on your book. I think I will see you probably at IT Nation in a few weeks. So
Yeah.
it'll
I'll be
be
there.
awesome. So it'll be good to see you.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you everybody for joining. This is MSP Confidential, brought to you by ScalePad, and we're on every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a great weekend, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks again, Ann.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.